2006 Lexus IS250 water pump and thermostat replacement. I'm Brian Essa from How To Automotive, and I'm going to walk you through that process. Okay, to get started, we're going to remove the upper engine covers, and these are just snap-on. Just lift up on them. They just have these little rubber grommets that mount on these little rubber parts, so just pull them up, set that aside, and then we're also going to remove the panels on at least on the front panel here. And on these, if they're the factory ones, you just push the little tabs inwards, push them down, maybe with a screwdriver. So after pushing the tabs in like so, they'll come out, and then you can lift this whole panel off and set that aside. I'm also going to remove this panel here. So next we're going to remove the 10mm bolt here and pull this air snorkel out of the way. So now we need to get the reservoir out of the way, the coolant reservoir, overflow reservoir. And on these right here, you'll have to squeeze the tab here and then push the electrical connector out like that. Remove the 10mm bolt here, and then a little bit below there's a 10mm bolt there, and the whole thing will lift out. Then you'll just take the cap off and pull that aside. So the next step is to take a bucket or something to catch the coolant, slide it underneath the car. And then we're going to remove the lower radiator hose and the upper radiator hose off of the thermostat housing here. So I took the upper hose completely off, and the lower hose I just unbolt it, and we're going to just tuck it aside out of the way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start removing these plastic covers. So they have these little, they're like plastic nuts. They're like about 12mm, but you can take them off by hand. So unscrew. There's going to be one here, one right here. You're also going to pop this little wire loom out of the cover, one below, and then I believe that's it. And this plastic cover will come off. Yeah, it was just the 3 screws, and then the cover came off. So just set that aside now. And then after that, what we're going to do is we're going to take the same thing on this side, the plastic cover. We're going to take the plastic nuts off and take this and there's a little Phillips screw here. We'll take that out, and we'll remove this cover also. Okay, the next step is going to be to remove the 10mm bolt here and 10mm bolt here, and that's going to unbolt our computer here. But don't unplug any of this. Leave it all plugged up, and we're going to take it and swing it out of over to the side and just tuck it in over here, out of the way. So there's a third bolt underneath here. So once you get all 3 of them out, you're just going to pull it off the mount here, and you're just going to tuck it out of the way. Maybe pull the hose out and then tuck it behind the hose. Okay, our next step is going to be to remove 1, 2, 3, 4 hoses. So we're going to take all 4 of these off, and then after that we're going to unbolt the thermostat housing and get this out of our way. Okay, now that we got all the hoses off, so we got the 2 up here, the 1 here, and the 1 below. Real quick, like what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up the bolts on the water pump pulley here, the 12mm bolts. Last time I did one of these, I was able to do it with just the air ratchet and just take it off. But if it tries to spin, you'll need a tool that looks like this, and it hooks in here and holds the belt. It'll hold the tensioner, and then you can get to the bolts and loosen it up. So go ahead and loosen the bolts up, and then after we get the bolts just cracked free, loose, we'll take the belt off and take the pulley off. And the reason why we're going to do that is because there's 1 bolt underneath here that holds the thermostat housing on. It's a little hard to get to, and it's easier to get to it if you remove the pulley. So now that you got the crank pulley bolts loose, you put a 14 wrench on your, and turn it counterclockwise and loosen the tension, and go ahead and slip your belt off. So now that you got the belt off, go ahead and remove your crank pulley. And what you're going to do is there's 6 bolts to hold the thermostat housing on. There's 1 here, 1 here, and 4 on this bottom one. So there's going to be 2 underneath. And the one that's way back here, underneath here, the way you get to it is above the crank pulley. You can get a wrench where the crank pulley was. You can get a wrench behind here and crack it free. And so once you get it cracked free a few times with the wrench, you should be able to spin it out with your fingers. And then go ahead and remove the 4 here, the 1 here, the 1 there, and then the whole thermostat housing will come off. So after you get all 6 of the bolts, it just kind of pries out a little bit off this little rubber O-ring on the pipe, and you take the whole assembly and set it aside for right now. Next we need to do is remove the 14mm nut from the idler pulley and take this idler pulley off. So after you get the idler pulley taken off and set aside, this one is the tensioner, the pulley. We need to remove this also, but this bolt is opposite thread, so we need to turn it right or clockwise to loosen the bolt. So go ahead and take this off, and make sure you set this aside and don't get them mixed up. So let's take that off and set it aside. And now after we get those off, we can start removing the 8, I believe it's 8 12mm bolts and 6 10mm bolts that hold the rest of the water pump on. So now that you got the water pump off, you want to clean it with a little razor blade and a rag, and you don't want to use a Brillo pad or anything. It's aluminum and it's easy to get. If you burr it in, it'll put little valleys in here and cause it to leak when you put it back together. So I just like to use a little razor blade like this and just kind of scrape the leading edges off and clean the surfaces up. And then after that, we're going to start proceeding to put the water pump on. Okay, after getting your mating surfaces cleaned up and ready to go, the next step to do in the preparation of putting the water pump on is on all the 12mm bolts. They have water coming through the bolt jackets, so you want to put a little black RTV on the tips of every one of the bolts, the 12mm bolts. And then on the 10mm bolts, those are the clamping bolts that hold the water pump on. They don't have any washers or anything, so you want to put a little thread sealer on the tips of the bolts, and it's like a little glue that prevents the bolts from backing back out and loosening up and causing the water pump to leak. So on all the 10mm bolts, put Loctite or thread sealer, or what they call, this is a Permanix brand, and Loctite is another brand. They have different colors, either green or blue will work, and then, like I said, black RTV on the 12mm. So you want to torque the 12mm bolts all down at 15 foot-pounds, and all the 10mm bolts will be torqued down at 81 inch-pounds, or approximately 7 foot-pounds. So after you get that done, then you're going to put a blue thread lock sealer on your idler pulley. So make sure you put a dab of that on there, because this will back off, and you're going to torque that down to 32 foot-pounds. And you're also going to do the idler pulley here. You lock sealer on it and torque it down to 32 foot-pounds. Okay, to torque the idler pulley first, what you're going to need is a metal, maybe like a Allen wrench would work, or in this case I actually have a tool that actually slides in. But in the bottom of the tensioner, there is a little hole. And what you do is you slide this metal rod in, and then you'll rotate it until it catches on the frame, and then it's tight enough. It'll hold the tensioner in place, and then you can torque the idler pulley down to 32 foot-pounds. And then after that, you release the tension and you slide the pin out. That's how you torque the tensioner pulley. So if you're doing all this at home, when you torque these down, if you don't have a torque wrench, you can rent one from like a parts store. But if you don't, you can do it by hand, by feel, and it's just a feel. So you don't want the 10mm too tight, and obviously the 12 will be a lot tighter, and then the 14mm on the idler and the tensioner pulleys will be pretty tight. So if you're doing it at home, you're just gonna have to do it by feel. So our next step is to change our O-rings. We're going to put our O-rings in here where the thermostat housing goes. So it has these little rubber notches on there. Let's see if we can zoom in on it. I may not zoom in on it. Anyways, so they help hold it in place. So you just go ahead and change that O-ring out and put it in place. And then you're going to change this O-ring here too. Okay, before we put our thermostat housing back on, we need to change over our new thermostat housing. It comes with one complete unit like that with the O-rings and everything in it. So all you have to do is remove the 3 10mm nuts and switch it over, and then tighten those down, and then we can proceed to put the thermostat housing back on. So now that we got our thermostat housing changed over, What I did was I put a little bit of lube on this seal, little grease on it, so it helps slide on. It doesn't pinch it or roll it. And make sure that your gasket is, your O-ring is on. So now you're just gonna line up the ports like so, and just lightly push it on. And my hose is in the way here. Get that out of the way. So I'm just gonna push it on, and then we're gonna start the bolts. Okay, so there's 5 bolts and 1 nut to hold the thermostat housing on. The shorter one out of the 5 is the one that went behind here. So okay, I wanted to remind you to put the thread sealer or the Loctite on the bolts and torque them down. You can go ahead and put the upper hoses on. We'll leave this one off for a second. Go ahead and put these hoses on and put the clamps back on them. Go ahead and put your lower hose on too and clamp it down. Now we're going to take the water pump pulley, put a little thread locker on all the bolts and put that on. And we're going to start everything up and run them up as tight as we can get them by hand. And then we'll put the belt on, and then we'll torque it down with the belt on. So this is a diagram of how the drive belt went back on. So you can see, in case you forgot. Okay, after getting the belt on, what you can do is you can put one 12mm wrench on a bolt and rotate it until they jam up against each other, and then you can hold this wrench with your left hand and tighten the opposite wrench with your right hand, and then you move one bolt over and just keep repeating the pattern until you have all 4 bolts tight. So now that we got the belt back on and the pulley tight, go ahead and reinstall the PCM back in its brackets and tighten that down, and then we're going to put the 2 plastic covers that we took off, put those back on. So after getting the plastic covers back on and tightened down, go ahead and put your lower hose back on next. Okay, after the lower hose is reinstalled, go ahead and put your coolant reservoir overflow bottle back in and your upper radiator hose back on. After you get the upper hose on, now you can go ahead and put your air snorkel back in, put the 1 bolt that held it on here. And on mine, one of the covers, the plastic clips went through this hole here. So after you get that on, then you can go ahead and put this front plastic cover on, or probably going to put the side one on first. Put this one on first, and then put the one that went here, and then we're going to fill it up with coolant. Okay, after you get the covers all back on, we're going to fill it up with Toyota approved coolant. We're going to make sure our overflow bottle is at the proper level too. And we're going to start the car and run the car and run it until our thermostat, which is going to be on the lower hose. You're going to wait till that opens up and feel it open up and watch the level drop off and readjust your level until it's full. Put your radiator cap back on and put your top engine cover back on. It just snaps down. And also you're going to want to check to make sure your electric fan operation comes on and runs. After that, all done, you would test drive the vehicle, make sure it's running right in the temperature range where it's supposed to be, and that completes the job of replacing the water pump and thermostat on a 2006 Lexus IS250. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive, and I'd like to thank you for watching my videos.